Let's take a break from the dreadful corona and drift away to Israel, where the election trilogy seems to finally come to an end. What was one of the most dramatic and tumultuous months in Israel's history is now multiplied by nationwide victorious anti-virus campaign and sending shockwaves through the entire political system. The good news: Israel might finally form its next government. So let's try to simplify this and trace back the timeline of events to outline the new Israeli rotational government of unity and its agenda, including Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. First of all, let me indulge you in a quick summary of the last year of Israeli politics. In April 2019, and then in September, and then in March 2020, there were 3 cycles of election. All led to a standstill. Prime Minister Netanyahu tried to negotiate a majority government, swept the voters 3 times, but not enough to get the coalition. His contestant, blue and white leader Benny Gantz, swept the voters 3 times, but also not enough to form a coalition. Both leaders realized that the prospect of 4th election cycle in just 18 months is becoming more and more prominent, and the dreadful coronavirus crisis starts to supersede what now seems to be petty political bargaining. So the pressure for Gantz to join Netanyahu's coalition led to so-called unity government. This was a bombshell because Gantz was elected first and foremost to overthrow Netanyahu, not to join him. And here comes another blow. When Gantz's partners in Blue and White Party, Lapid and Ya'alon, learn about joining forces with Netanyahu, they decide to immediately dismantle the Blue and White alliance that was established just 1 year ago as a solid alternative to Netanyahu. Undoubtedly one of the most dramatic and historic days of the Israeli politics. So now what? Gantz is no longer head of the 33-seat Blue and White alliance, but a leader of a 17-seat faction. He partners with Netanyahu that has a 58-seat right-wing bloc behind him. Though severely outnumbered, Gantz still has the leverage, because without him, there won't be a coalition. The new unity government is finally sworn in, and a bizarre government it is. First of all, Gantz, a retired IDF chief of staff, and a rookie politician, will get a chance to become a prime minister. For a year and a half, he will serve as Netanyahu's deputy prime minister and a defense minister. After a year and a half, Gantz will replace Netanyahu and become the prime minister, while Netanyahu will serve as his deputy and assume other senior roles. Sounds a bit of a stretch, but these are peculiar circumstances. Will the rotation actually happen? No one can vouch for that or predict otherwise. Maybe, maybe not. And Gantz enters the deal with 16 additional members of his faction. They will all receive prominent ministerial and parliamentary positions. So now, instead of your typical 20 ministers in the Israeli government, there will be 36 ministers. 36. There are not enough existing ministers really, so brand new offices are created with poetic names such as Minister of Community Strengthening or Minister of Government-Parliament Relations. Are voters on both sides happy? Not really. Israelis voted either against Netanyahu or for him. So forcing 2 political adversaries to tango together does not seem romantic at all. But it is either that or 4th cycle of election in 18 months. Look, the majority on both sides is relieved that at least there is not going to be a 4th cycle of election. But many people on the left are disappointed to see Netanyahu whistling his way, as they see it, to remain in power again. Many right-wing voters are also disappointed with losing the Ministry of Justice to Gantz's party, thus losing the momentum for judicial system reform they've been drumbeating about for quite a while. So now what? There are three major items on the immediate agenda of this government. First of all, managing the coronavirus. Israel seems to be recovering pretty well, with very low death tolls and numbers of infected. Kindergartens and elementary schools are already open. Malls are about to be back in business. The better the coronavirus situation, the more questionable becomes the Netanyahu-Gantz tandem. I mean, if it's not an emergency anymore, why do we need that bloated adversarial government? So, do you smell like the election is beyond the corner? Another major issue on the agenda is the judicial system reform that the right is rooting for. The Israeli Supreme Court is not purely an elected body, but to the most part appointed by the judicial system itself. Many right-wing voters are disappointed with what they perceive as biased and proactive intervention of the Supreme Court in the legislative and executive branches. This is, of course, bundled with the upcoming bribery trial of Prime Minister Netanyahu himself. The hearings start on May 24th, and the trial itself might be dragged on for years. Prime ministers in Israel are exempt from resigning from their position till the complete and final verdict. Appointing Gantz's party member, Nissenkorn, as the Minister of Justice signals postponing of the reform in the judicial system. And this is the price Netanyahu was willing to pay to promote the third item on Israel's government agenda, and that is the annexation of the West Bank, or, depending on your politics, applying Israeli sovereignty onto Jewish communities of Judea and Samaria. If you ask an Israeli kid to draw a map of Israel, they will probably draw something like that. But if you look at the map of Israel on any given atlas or on Google Maps, you will always see that dotted line carving out what is called the West Bank. And many people envision this piece of land, about the size of Delaware, as Palestine. However, this dotted line is not a Palestinian Authority border. It is the border of disputed territories. Disputed. That is why the line is dotted. In fact, only 40% of this territory is under Palestinian control, and 60%, known as Area C, is under Israeli control. This is according to the Oslo Accords signed by the leader of the Organization for Liberation of Palestine, PLO, Yasser Arafat, and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. They both won Nobel Peace Prize for that 40-60% deal in 1994. So what Netanyahu's government, backed up by the current US administration, will try to do in July 2020 is to apply Israeli sovereignty to Area C that is already under Israeli control. There are about 500,000 Jews living in Area C. How many Arabs? No one is quite sure about that, not even the Palestinian Authority. Estimates vary between 150,000 to 50,000 Arabs. Is the sovereignty going to be applied to the entire Area C or just to Jewish communities, excluding Palestinian towns and villages? And if the Arabs are to be included, will they get Israeli citizenship or some other residential status? It remains to be discovered. But what does it actually mean, applying Israeli sovereignty? Right now, Jewish Israeli citizens living in Israeli-controlled parts of Judea and Samaria are not subject to Israeli law, but rather to what is called Israeli military order. This military order is carried out by Israeli military police and military courts instead of a civil court. Applying Israeli sovereignty will, therefore, extend the Israeli civic law to Israeli citizens and declare the territories in question as a legitimate part of sovereign Israel, just like Haifa or Tel Aviv. So it is a symbolic political statement of a great magnitude. But do not expect Israeli troops moving in. They have already been there from day one. The sovereignty can be either thin, including only the Jewish communities and their municipal boundaries, or extended to additional open areas. It looks like at this point, Arab settlements in the Israeli-controlled Area C will not be included in this expansion. Certainly not areas A and B controlled by the Palestinian Authority, at least not in July 2020. Why is Israeli right wing pushing for sovereignty? Because it redefines the narrative from occupied or disputed territories to sovereign Israeli Judea and Samaria, because it provides clarity and direction, and because it is an insurance policy for the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria against possible future evacuations and disengagement. The Jewish communities in Gaza, for instance, were under Israeli military order, not under Israeli sovereignty, and they were dismantled in 2005, uprooting 18 communities and almost 9,000 Jews. But once the Israeli sovereignty is applied to a territory, Jewish communities can only be removed with 75% majority in the Knesset or with a referendum. Why is Israeli right in such a hurry to do it now? Because it has the backing of the current US administration. Make hay while the sun shines. So what are the concerns that the opponents of the annexation raise? First of all, economic and social. The Israeli left, just like the Israeli right, are not thrilled about absorbing a hostile Muslim population and granting them full democratic rights and social economical benefits. The response to that point vary from, oh, we're not going to apply sovereignty to Arab settlements, to, well, that's okay, the Arabs are what, 50, 150,000, not a biggie, definitely absorbable. Another argument is the repercussions Israel is expected to face from the international community. And this is certainly an important concern. It is safe to predict that some countries in the West, and naturally in the Muslim world, will be outraged and initiate diplomatic, judicial, and economic sanctions. That said, this is not going to be the first or the last time Israel will be dealing with that type of backlash. Some say that this move will put an end to the hopes for the two-state solution. Others respond that this solution was never viable, or vice versa. We already have the two-state solution on the ground, the State of Israel and the quasi-state of the autonomous Palestinian Authority. Trump's peace plan is certainly based on a two-state solution, offering the Palestinian Arabs a state significantly larger than what they have now. Another important drawback to consider is a possible escalation of violence from Palestinian Authority, from Gaza, or neighboring countries. Or quite the opposite, a collapse of the Palestinian Authority or Jordan. And these are all real and probable scenarios to consider, regardless of whether Israel extends its sovereignty or not. Oddly enough, Israel is a strong and viable player, radiating stability to the otherwise tumultuous Middle Eastern region. What do Israelis think of that move? Well, election is the most reliable poll we have to answer that question. 60% of Jews want the application of Israeli sovereignty. This is exactly what they voted for. The other 40% of Jews will range from indifference to moderate or fierce opposition. And, of course, overwhelming majority of Muslim Arab citizens are definitely naysayers. So, we've learned about the unprecedentedly large government, rotating prime ministers, all a result of 500 days of political gridlock and the necessity to fight off the coronavirus. What's next? Figuring out how to juggle the Netanyahu-Gantz tandem, opening Netanyahu's trial, and dealing with Judea and Samaria. Stay tuned. Israel is never a bore.